Kyle Seeback, Conservative MP and Labour critic, joins me now. Kyle, good evening and thank you for your time here on CTV News Channel. What is your main concern with the government forcing flight attendants back to work?
Well, the huge issue is when they force them back to work, they keep the existing contract in place. So all the unpaid hours of work that the flight attendants do, that continues until there's a new agreement put in place. And what we do know is there's a study that says it's about 35 hours a month. If you take that by the average hourly wage of a flight attendant, it works out to be about $11,000 per year of unpaid labor. Now, that might not be a lot of money to someone like Mark Carney, who's a wealthy individual, but for most Canadians, that's a lot of money. So by taking away the right to strike, this is exactly what Mark Carney has done.
Well, we know that both parties will continue to negotiate, as was said by the minister earlier today, Kyle. But what do you believe this decision shows about the Liberal government's way of handling labour disputes? The previous Liberal government intervened in other disputes, as we know, and so has this government.
Well, it's the same government. I mean, it's almost all the same ministers. The only change has been Mark Carney, and he's using the same toolkit that's been used previously to take away workers' right to strike. And look, they're fighting for fair wages. And I support that because everyone is suffering under the cost of living that's going on in Canada. Over the last 10 years, everything has skyrocketed. I know that, going to the grocery store for a lot of people used to be a fun thing to do. Now it's nothing but stress because of the price of groceries. Add that to flight attendants having all those unpaid hours. And, to me, this is a terrible decision by the government.
Now, we know, Kyle, that you are urging the Prime Minister to work with the Parliament and pass Conservatives' Flight Attendants Fairness Act. Talk to us a little more about this act and how it will go to benefit the flight attendants.
Well, that's exactly it. It would make amendments to the Canada Labour Code so that people wouldn't actually have to show up at work and not be paid, which is the real big issue that the flight attendants are fighting for. Yes, they're seeking wage increases. They're on a 10-year contract and they've fallen behind because of the cost of living crisis. Our piece of legislation that we put forward in the last Parliament would have made those unpaid hours not legal under the Canada Labour Code, because everyone, when they show up to work, they expect to actually be paid for that. And I know I heard terrible stories from flight attendants who had shown up to work. The flight was so delayed that they actually had to go home and they're not being paid. And this is the contract that Mark Carney has said is going to continue in existence.
And what about the government's argument? The minister today came out and said very clearly that this was not the time to go on strike, especially when we need things to be moving fast within the country. It's not just about people who are stranded. Yes, that's a very big deal. But she also said about, for example, cargo. We need things to move in this country soon and fast.
Well, look, there's other airlines that operate that can do many of these things, but the real issue is it's just a huge failure by the minister. The minister has all kinds of ways, like moral authority, legal authorities, and others, to keep the parties at the bargaining table. That was the minister's job, to keep these parties bargaining and making sure that they're moving in the right direction. And they failed in doing that, and therefore what they're left with is this using Section 107, which they've now used for 3 times in a row, rather than letting the deals be made at the bargaining table. And that's what our position is. The best deals are made when the parties are at the table bargaining.
Kyle Seeback, Conservative Labour critic. Appreciate your time and your insights, Kyle. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks very much.